On Christmas afternoon, Aurora Bennett stood on the front porch of her parents' oak-paneled home in Salem, Oregon, holding a perfectly baked apple pie made from Grandma Evelyn's recipe and a gift wrapped in crimson paper with a gold ribbon. The scent of roast turkey drifted through the crisp air, mingling with the soft sound of Christmas carols from inside. Though she had lived independently in Portland for over a decade, returning home always triggered a knot in her stomach. But this year she carried something else with her, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. All her life, Aurora had been the shadow in the Bennett family. As the middle child, she was wedged between her older brother Garrett, the real estate prodigy and family pride, and her younger sister Claire, the sweet baby everyone adored. With her auburn hair and quiet nature, Aurora had once believed that effort and achievement might earn her a place in the family's spotlight. But the harder she tried, the more invisible she became. Her first memory of injustice was at age 7. She had spent days building a cardboard diorama of their neighborhood for the school fair. The night before it was due, she found it destroyed, ripped to pieces. Garrett, then 10, stood beside the wreckage, feigning concern. Aurora got upset because it didn't look right. I tried to help fix it. Her parents believed him just like always. That night, her father helped Garrett build a new project in the garage. He won first prize. Aurora arrived empty-handed and heartbroken. Every year after that followed the same pattern in different forms. When she made the honor roll, Garrett whispered to their parents that she had cheated. When she got asked to prom, Garrett hinted to the boy that she had a crush on someone else. The invitation was withdrawn 3 days later. Her parents never questioned it. Maybe they didn't want to. College was supposed to be her escape. But every holiday meant returning to a table where her accomplishments were ignored or overshadowed. If she designed a new office tower, Garrett had just closed a beachfront deal. If she got promoted, he'd bought another investment property. Then there was the silver locket promised to her by Grandma Evelyn, a family heirloom that had traveled from Ireland. After the funeral, she went to retrieve it only to find it missing. That evening, she spotted it around her cousin Emily's neck. "Grandma gave it to me privately," Emily claimed. Aurora tried to explain the truth, but her mother only sighed. "Sweetheart, are you sure you're not just confused from grief?" This year, Aurora brought a special gift for Garrett, a neatly bound dossier of years' worth of proof emails, texts, and even a voice recording. Her therapist, Dr. Marshall, had cautioned her, confrontation rarely changes family systems. Still, Aurora carried one last hope that someone would finally see her, not as dramatic, not as jealous, but as who she truly was. Adjusting her dress and steadying her breath, she rang the doorbell. Aurora once had an ally in her extended family, her cousin Emily Carter. As children, they were practically inseparable, like honorary sisters. They built blanket forts, exchanged diary entries, and dreamed together about life beyond the Bennett family gatherings. In a family where Aurora often felt like an outsider, Emily had been her safe space, someone who truly saw her. That changed after Grandma Evelyn's death. Evelyn had always been Aurora's champion. She encouraged her to pursue architecture when others dismissed it as a fancy hobby. She listened, remembered birthdays without reminders, and most memorably had promised to leave Aurora the family heirloom, a delicate silver locket passed down through 4 generations. It wasn't just jewelry. The locket was a symbol. Evelyn had shared its story countless times, how it crossed the Atlantic from a tiny Irish village with Aurora's great-great-grandmother through Ellis Island to Oregon. It carried dreams, resilience, and the promise that whoever wore it was the keeper of the family's legacy. Being given that locket wasn't just sentimental, it was a recognition. After the funeral, Aurora returned to Evelyn's room just as her grandmother had asked her to do to retrieve the locket. But when she opened the jewelry box, it was empty. A cold wave of dread washed over her. That evening during the post-funeral tea, Aurora's stomach dropped as she spotted Emily wearing the locket. At first, she hoped it was a misunderstanding. She pulled Emily aside and gently asked, "Where did you get that?" Emily didn't blink. "Grandma gave it to me. A week before she passed, I visited and she said it was a surprise. Said she changed her mind. I guess she wanted me to have it." Aurora froze. That didn't make sense. Grandma Evelyn wasn't the type to change her mind. She'd stated on more than one occasion, and even with Emily present, that the locket would go to Aurora. Aurora turned to her mother for support. But Margaret's response was a tight-lipped frown. "Honey, let's not turn this into something dramatic. Maybe you misunderstood. You've been under a lot of stress." Her father Thomas offered only a silent nod, eyes carefully avoiding hers. But Aurora hadn't misunderstood. No one believed her. The betrayal ran deeper than jewelry. It was another moment of being unseen, unheard, this time by someone she had trusted most. After that, Emily wore the locket to every family event. A glittering reminder that in this family even truth could be denied if it came from the wrong mouth. Aurora didn't confront her again. She didn't cause a scene. She simply stepped back, recalibrated. She began drawing invisible boundaries, quietly recording the things no one else seemed to notice or care about. And that's when the idea of the envelope began to take shape. In her small penthouse apartment in Portland, Aurora laid out a sheet of pale silver wrapping paper across her walnut dining table. Carefully, she placed a neatly bound folder in the center and tied it with a soft blue ribbon. It wasn't a photo album. It wasn't a sentimental keepsake. Inside were the fragments of a truth-long buried emails, texts, and recordings, documenting how her brother Garrett had spent years quietly sabotaging her. Aurora no longer hoped that the evidence would change anyone. This wasn't about redemption, it was about validation. A way of saying, "I'm not crazy. I remember correctly. And here's the truth." The text where Garrett had laughed with a friend about how easy it was to convince their parents that Aurora was emotionally unstable. The emails he sent to extended family planting doubts about her reliability. The voice memo from last Christmas where his mocking laugh rang out as he described turning everyone against her, each one tucked into that elegant silver package like a silent indictment. Her therapist, Dr. Marshall, had warned her families don't change because of evidence. They change if and only if they want to. Aurora's response had been quiet but firm. "I don't need them to change. I just need them to finally see me, maybe for the first and last time." The night before Christmas, Aurora sat alone by her window watching snow fall gently over the park. She had wrapped the perfect gifts, a hand-woven scarf in her mother's favorite blue, a first-edition mystery novel for her father, a custom wedding album for Claire, and the special gift for Garrett. But what she had wrapped more carefully than anything else was her own heart. She had braced herself for the cold indifference, the inevitable dismissal, and if it came to it, the quiet goodbye to the idea of family as she once knew it. On Christmas morning, Aurora slipped into a forest green dress, applied subtle makeup, and styled her auburn hair in soft waves, just how Grandma Evelyn had loved it. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just wanted to feel proud of who she was, no matter how they received her. The silver box was nestled neatly among the rest of the presents in her gift basket. On the drive to Salem, she didn't play Christmas music. She drove in silence like someone approaching the final mile of a long journey. Not with dread, but with a kind of quiet acceptance. When she pulled up in front of her parents' colonial-style home roof lined with white lights, a berry-laced wreath on the door, Aurora inhaled deeply. She lifted the pie and basket from the passenger seat and stepped onto the porch. She rang the doorbell. Today she might still be unseen, but this time she would not be erased. The door opened to reveal her mother, Margaret Bennett, dressed in a deep red cashmere sweater, pearl earrings gleaming under the chandelier. "Aurora?" she said, her smile not quite touching her eyes. "Right on time." It sounded more like a warning than a welcome. Aurora stepped inside, holding her gift basket and homemade apple pie. The scent of roast turkey, nutmeg, and pine filled the air, but the one thing missing was any sense of belonging. The living room buzzed with laughter. Her father, Thomas, chatted cheerfully with her brother-in-law, Patrick, while Claire and her husband posed for photos near the tree. Across the room, Garrett held court with the aunts and uncles, Vanessa at his side, like a queen on her throne. "Your daughter's here," Margaret announced as if noting a new coat rack. Only Claire broke away for a quick hug. "Nice dress," she whispered. Then lowering her voice added, "Just a heads up, Mom's been stressed about dinner. Maybe don't bring up work. She had a migraine for 2 days after your promotion talk last year." Aurora swallowed her reaction. When her cousin Emily arrived with her new boyfriend, the room lit up. People rushed over with drinks and praise. Around Emily's neck gleamed Grandma Evelyn's silver locket, catching the light of the Christmas tree. Aurora placed her gifts under the tree and tried to join conversations, but each one shrank when she approached. Polite nods, awkward shifts, no real welcome. When it was time for family photos, Margaret arranged everyone with care. Garrett and Vanessa in the center, Claire and Patrick on the left, Emily and her boyfriend on the right. Aunts and uncles filled in the gaps. Aurora stepped forward. "Where should I stand?" Margaret blinked as if surprised she was still there. "Aurora, dear, can you take the photo? You're so good with that." So she did, framing everyone's joy from behind the lens. Later, while arranging appetizers, Garrett leaned in. "Green's a bold choice for your complexion," he said, just loud enough to draw glances. "Guess architecture firms don't prioritize fashion." Aurora smiled tightly. "And I guess real estate doesn't require manners." His expression cooled. "Still doing therapy, Mom says you've been working on your issues." Heat rose to her face. That had been private, shared only with her mother in a rare moment of vulnerability. "I'm doing well. Thanks for asking," she replied stiffly. Garrett smirked, satisfied, but the worst was yet to come. Aurora noticed something off. Only 10 place settings. 12 people. She walked around the dining table. Everyone had a name card except her. "Mom," she said quietly in the kitchen. "I don't see my seat." Margaret didn't look up. "Don't fuss now, Aurora. Can you get more ice?" Returning, Aurora overheard her mother whispering to Aunt Julie. "She always makes everything about herself." Garrett asked to keep things intimate. "Thomas needs space for his back." Aurora froze in the hallway. When her mother called dinners ready, everyone filed in cheerfully. Garrett sat beside their father at the head. Aurora stood at the doorway, waiting. "Where should I sit?" she asked calmly. Margaret smiled, faintly spooning mashed potatoes. "The table's full, dear. Maybe, just for today, you can eat in the car." Silence. Garrett tilted his head, smirking. Why waste a seat on her? Aurora didn't cry. She didn't run. She stood still and finally understood the seat was never hers. Not today. Not ever. Aurora stood at the doorway, fingertips gripping the wooden frame, while the soft clinking of silverware filled the room. Everyone was seated chatting over wine and mashed potatoes, as if excluding her from the table was just another harmless tradition. No one looked up. No one protested. No one pulled out a chair. But instead of shattering her, it freed her. A strange feeling settled in her chest, not sorrow, but clarity. Every belief she had clung to, that kindness, effort, or excellence, would one day earn her a place, crumbled in that moment. And in its place was a sharp, final truth. They had never wanted her there, and she no longer needed to be. She stepped forward into the dining room, conversation stilled. Garrett's voice trailed off mid-sentence. Aurora walked to the Christmas tree, picked up the silver-wrapped gift with the soft blue ribbon his gift. She moved behind him. For once, Garrett had to look up to see her. "Garrett," she said, voice steady. "I brought you something special this Christmas." His brows furrowed. Their mother bristled. "Can it wait until after dinner?" Margaret's tone was tight, almost desperate. "No," Aurora said. "It can't." She gestured to his plate. "Check underneath." The room went still. Garrett hesitated under her gaze, then finally lifted the plate. Underneath sat a cream-colored envelope, his name written in blue ink. "What is this?" he snapped. "The truth," Aurora said calmly. "Something this family's never been comfortable with." He opened it. As his eyes scanned the first few pages, the color drained from his face, then surged back in anger. "What is this garbage?" "It's your texts. The ones where you told your friends how easy it was to make Mom and Dad think I was unstable. The emails where you spread lies about me to relatives, and a copy of Grandma Evelyn's will naming me as the rightful heir to her locket." Murmurs rippled around the table. Emily's face paled. Her hand flew to the locket at her throat. "She told me," Garrett said. No, Aurora cut in. "He lied. He kept the will from everyone and let you believe something that wasn't true." Rachel, Garrett's wife, quietly removed her hand from his arm. "Let me see that," she said, reaching for the papers. Garrett tried to pull them back. "This is all nonsense. Aurora's just being dramatic." "If I'm lying," Aurora said gently, "why are you hiding it?" Silence. She pointed again. "There's one more note." Garrett's jaw clenched. Slowly, he lifted the last folded slip. "This is the last time I'll try to make you see me. I release you from pretending to care, and I release myself from waiting for love that was never yours to give." Aurora stood there still and resolute. Then she stepped back, looked around the room. A perfect dinner, a picture-perfect family, and a woman no longer willing to be erased. "Merry Christmas," she said softly. "Enjoy your meal." She turned and walked out, leaving behind the quietest silence that house had ever known. Aurora closed the oak door behind her without looking back. The sounds inside, clinking silverware, someone hissing. She's lost it faded into muffled echoes behind the double-glazed glass. She left with nothing but her coat, her purse, and an unexpected sense of weightlessness. Outside, the snow had begun to fall heavier. The glow from the porch lights shimmered across the lawn, lighting up the snowflakes like tiny diamonds. Aurora paused for a moment, not as someone cast out, but as someone who had freed herself. She didn't shake. She didn't cry. She felt peace. Her car was parked a few steps away. As she slid into the driver's seat, the chill of the leather made her shiver. But for the first time in years, the cold outside was more tolerable than the atmosphere inside the house that once bore the name home. She started the engine and pulled away slowly. No rushing, no escaping. Just an intentional departure, like unraveling one knot at a time from the invisible ropes she had carried her whole life. 20 minutes later, Aurora pulled into the small lot of the Evergreen Inn, a boutique hotel nestled near the city's Central Park. She had once thought that hotels on Christmas night were only for stranded travelers or lonely souls. But now she knew better. Sometimes the loneliest place is the house where you're supposed to belong. The lobby was quiet, just one front desk attendant, Bethany, offering a soft, empathetic smile. "Just you tonight?" she asked, her tone free of pity, just simple understanding. Aurora nodded. "Last-minute change of plans." Bethany handed over a room key. "I've placed you in a Parkview room. The restaurant's still serving Christmas dinner until 9 if you're hungry." Upstairs, Aurora peeled off her boots and coat and sank onto the edge of the bed. Outside her window, the street was blanketed in white. Christmas lights from nearby stores and homes cast soft glows on the snow-covered road, reflections like watercolors dancing across the glass. Her phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "What was that?" "Garrett is freaking out." "Are you okay?" A missed call from her mother, followed by a voicemail. Aurora, this behavior is unacceptable. You disrupted everyone's dinner. Call me back so we can discuss how you're going to apologize to Garrett. Aurora stared at the screen, then hit delete. Her father had texted too. Your mother's very upset. Please call. She didn't. Instead, she ordered room service roast turkey, mashed potatoes, and maple glazed squash. When the tray arrived, she opened the large window curtain and sat at the small table overlooking the glowing trees in the park. Alone, but no longer lonely. There were no toasts, no family laughter. But there was something more sacred: freedom. She ate slowly, as if savoring the final course of her old life. She didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. The table she'd been denied today was no longer the table she wanted to sit at. Aurora woke the next morning in her quiet hotel room, sunlight pouring through the white curtains. She didn't feel heavy. Instead, there was a strange stillness inside her, a softness as if her body had finally been allowed to breathe without bracing. She made tea, opened her notebook, and began to write. About the missing seat, the envelope, the complicit silence, and the moment she walked out, not as someone defeated, but as someone fully awake. Her phone buzzed. A message from Emily appeared. Aurora, I need to talk. Not about the locket, about Garrett. Aurora stared at the screen, her thumb hovering for a moment. Then she replied, 10 a.m., Riverlight Cafe. At the small cafe near the park, Emily was already waiting, twisting a napkin in her hands. The first thing Aurora noticed, the silver locket was gone. Emily looked up when she arrived. Thanks for coming, she said, her voice shaky. Last night, things fell apart. She explained that after Aurora left, Garrett tried to hide the envelope, but Rachel snatched it and read several excerpts aloud, including a text where Garrett bragged about controlling Aurora's narrative. She froze, then started questioning him, not just about the family messages, but another woman. Aurora blinked. You mean he was cheating? Emily nodded. Rachel left dinner shortly after. Your mom kept defending him, but your dad? He finally said, enough. He stood up for the first time ever. Aurora was quiet, not from satisfaction, but from genuine shock. Emily pulled out a small box and slid it across the table. The locket. It was always meant for you. I'm sorry, I didn't believe you. Aurora took it silently. No words needed. The gesture spoke louder than any apology. In the days that followed, her phone buzzed constantly. Her mother cycled through fury, bargaining, and finally silence. But her father was different. 3 days later, he messaged, I've done a lot of thinking. I should have spoken up years ago. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk. She didn't reply immediately, but there was something in the tone, unforced, sincere, that made her believe that maybe some parts of family can still be salvaged. Lauren called on New Year's Eve. Rachel filed for divorce, she said flatly. And, I'm sorry, Aurora. I should have said something at dinner, but I didn't. I just sat there. You did, Aurora said evenly. You said nothing. But now you're trying. Lauren hesitated. Would you want to meet just us? No drama. No one else. Aurora looked out the hotel window where snow had begun to melt and replied, I'll think about it. 2 weeks after Christmas, Aurora returned to her apartment in Portland. It wasn't large, but sunlight poured through the windows, and the plants on the sill had survived her absence. In the kitchen, an unfinished pouch of oolong tea waited for her. Everything looked the same, but something essential had changed. She was no longer the woman who left her parents' house on a snowy night with a heavy heart and unshed tears. She came back as someone who had spoken her truth and walked away without flinching. On her first morning home, Aurora opened every window and began cleaning with purpose. She removed the neutral decorations she'd chosen to avoid offending her mother during visits. The bold wine-red abstract painting her mom once deemed too loud was now centered above the couch. A bundle of dried lavender, the scent Grandma Evelyn adored, sat on the kitchen counter. She was no longer designing her space for others. She was reclaiming it for herself. Aurora continued therapy with Dr. Marshall, though their sessions became less frequent. Their talks no longer felt like triage, but like maintenance, like tending a garden. Aurora was learning to recognize the difference between guilt and growth, between peace and appeasement, between setting boundaries and fearing abandonment. One morning, she reopened an old wooden box. Inside were unsent letters, birthday cards from family, and a photograph of a younger Aurora standing alone at her graduation, eyes scanning the crowd. This time she didn't cry. She looked at the photo and whispered, "I found you. You're not alone anymore." Surprisingly, it was Emily who reached out the most. Since their cafe meeting, Emily had stayed present, not overbearing, not apologetic, just present. The two discovered a shared love for family history. They started collecting pieces of Grandma Evelyn's life, handwritten notes, old photos, stories passed down. One afternoon during a visit to Aurora's apartment, Emily stood by the window and looked up at a black and white photo of Evelyn. "I wish she could see you now." Aurora smiled. Maybe she already does. With her father, the rebuilding was slower but real. Their first meeting was quiet coffee in a corner diner with no mention of Christmas. On their second, Thomas looked at her directly and said, "I don't have an excuse. I was a coward, and I was lazy with your protection." Aurora didn't cry, but she reached across the table and placed her hand lightly over his. They wouldn't return to what once was, but they were building something new, not based on performance, but on truth. By March, cherry blossoms had begun blooming outside her window, and Aurora knew the old season had truly ended. 3 months after that fateful Christmas night, Aurora stood in her living room, measuring tape in hand, and a quiet excitement in her chest. She was reconfiguring the corner of the room for a brand new oak dining table she had commissioned, not for formal gatherings or staged dinners, but for cozy evenings filled with laughter and free of tension. The old table, small, sleek, and chosen to blend in, was gone. In its place, Aurora wanted something that reflected the life she was now building, spacious, grounded, and big enough for the people who truly saw and valued her. And those people had started to show up. Kimberly, her longtime colleague, had become a close friend. What began as casual design chats had evolved into deep conversations about boundaries, healing, and hope. Every Thursday night, Kimberly and her husband came over with a bottle of wine, homemade bread, and stories that filled the room with warmth. They called it healing dinners, a tradition born from a season of rupture. Emily, too, had joined several times, often bringing bits of Grandma Evelyn's handwritten letters she'd found in old boxes. Together, they framed a photo of Evelyn and placed it at the head of the table so that, in a way, the woman who first believed in Aurora had returned to her rightful place. Lauren, after multiple apologies, began visiting with no agendas, no messages from their mother, no mentions of Garrett. She didn't explain or defend. She simply showed up. And for Aurora, that was enough. Even her father, Thomas, had been invited once. He arrived with a small bouquet of dried lavender, saying softly before entering, "Thank you for letting me sit at a table you built yourself." Aurora didn't reply. She simply pulled out a chair for him and smiled. No one at that table had to perform. No one had to stay silent to avoid upsetting others. No one had to earn their place through endurance. Because this table wasn't built on blood, it was built on trust. One warm summer night after everyone had gone home, Aurora cleaned the table under soft golden light. She laid out her new linen runner, folded the napkins, and poured herself a glass of red wine. She sat down, traced her hand along the wood grain, and closed her eyes. She no longer needed to ask for a seat. She was no longer defined by people who refused to see her. She had her own table now, and around it a real family she had chosen. One early autumn afternoon, Aurora sat on her apartment balcony wrapped in a mustard yellow knit shawl, a steaming cup of tea in hand. In front of her, the park trees blazed in brilliant shades of amber and crimson. No music played, no buzzing phone, just the breeze and a quiet that felt whole. She opened her brown leather journal, the one that had followed her through winter, and flipped back to its earliest pages. The handwriting from Christmas night still sat there raw and trembling. There was no seat for me at the table. But I don't want that seat anymore. Aurora smiled. This time, it wasn't a bitter smile. It was the smile of someone who finally knows who she is and no longer needs to prove it to anyone. For years, she had lived as if her worth depended on others, especially her family validating it. She worked harder. She stayed quieter. She hoped longer. But the more she tried, the smaller she felt adrift in the very place that was supposed to feel like home. That Christmas wasn't just a night of exclusion. It was a mirror reflecting how others saw her, but more importantly showing how she had stopped seeing herself. She didn't just leave a house. She left a role that demanded she endure to be loved. And from that moment on, she began rewriting what family, home, and self-worth meant. Aurora had learned, not everyone who shares your blood deserves a seat at your table. Forgiveness does not always require reconciliation, and not every seat is worth fighting for. She could forgive without shrinking. She could remember without being ruled by memory. She could love, but this time, it would start with herself. Inside her apartment, the oak table still held dishes from last night's dinner with friends. Beside it, a framed photo of Grandma Evelyn stood proudly next to a bundle of dried lavender. Aurora stepped in from the balcony and rested her hand on the back of the one chair that hadn't been filled. Her own, not beside anyone, not opposite anyone, but in the middle of a space she built for herself, by herself, where she never needed to ask permission to exist. And that for her was the most important seat of all.